Living clean, the journey continues. Our traditions teach us that in NA there are no classes of membership. It follows that the new member is as likely to save the life of the old-timer as the reverse. When we stay open to that reality, many of the limitations we set for ourselves disappear. We teach by example. Even when we are teaching what not to do, we're still carrying a message. Sharing our experience gives it meaning and value. Our hope is that the new member will do better than we did, that they can learn from our mistakes. It doesn't always work. There are people who tend to learn things the hard way. But when a member with 2 years clean shares with us that the experience we had at 10 years kept them from doing the same thing, we know we are getting better personally and as a fellowship. Wisdom is building on past experience to cope with new events. When we think about our lives now in contrast with our active addiction, it's important to remember that it's not where we've been that counts, but where we are going. But where we've been in recovery is the foundation of our wisdom. We learn from our experience and we use it to help others. Our wisdom grows as we learn to see ourselves honestly without judging or jumping to conclusions. Growing pains. Sooner or later, we experience a particular kind of opportunity or catastrophe we hadn't heard about in meetings. Sometimes an event like a breakup, the loss of a job, or changes in our family triggers a flow of feelings and it doesn't stop. Grief, hardship, or betrayal can make us feel terribly lonely. Occasionally, we experience physical changes that bring emotional fright with them, including depression, anxiety, and deep fear. There are also times when we find ourselves in crisis, even though the circumstances of our lives look pretty good. Even the excitement of living our dreams, taking on a new career, moving to a faraway place, creating a family, can make us feel like we don't belong. Sometimes an outside event starts the ball rolling. At other times, a cascade of emotions seems to start from nowhere. It can feel like we're backed into a corner even though nothing is really happening at all. Once we've been through this feeling and survived it clean, we know it won't last forever. But that doesn't mean that we can see our way out. We come through these experiences with a deepened understanding and faith in our recovery. Through hard work and grace, if we keep coming back, we do get free. Eventually, all of us come to an emotional crisis in recovery. We start wondering if recovery will last, or if we've just gotten a brief reprieve and we're about to go crazy again. A member shared, "My life seemed stable by outward appearances, but inside I was a mess. I was clean but miserable, reactive and fearful." We find ourselves in these dark places sometimes with many, many years clean. We deal with our addiction, but some of our underlying issues remain untouched. Long buried emotions come pouring to the surface, and we may not have the tools to deal with them. As I discovered things about myself, a member shared, my emotions started to run amok. There are no bitter ends in recovery, but sometimes it feels like that's where we are. Recovery gives us a new chance at life. Sometimes we have to accept that invitation more than once. The bottoms we hit in recovery can be frightening. We go through some dark times. When we're in pain, it can be hard to reach out and easier to see differences. But even in the darkness, the process is still going on. When NA members say, "Don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle," we're not just talking about the first one. Our lives are full of moments when we're faced with the difficult decision to grow or go. Many of us leave, not when things are horrible, but when we have one more spiritual hump to get over. We lose our way right before the miracle, sometimes again and again. The faith that leads us to build a successful life may not be sufficient to sustain that day after day. A new kind of surrender is necessary if we're to stay clean and keep growing. Spiritual growth can be bewildering, frightening, and very lonely. Some of us give up on the process at this crucial point when there's nothing left to blame or change but ourselves. Selfishness and self-centeredness die hard, but we can get through it with the help of others who have survived this passage. And we find great gifts awaiting for us on the other side. What we heard when we were new still stands. Keep coming back, no matter what. Many of the challenges we face have concrete symptoms, but are actually spiritual in nature. It's hard to spot a spiritual crisis. Usually it's disguised as a crisis in our relationships, finances, career, or family. When we're in crisis, we may try all kinds of escapes and excuses before we resort to the steps. We can be intolerant, angry, defensive, vengeful, guilty, and resentful, testing the patience and tolerance of those around us. The only way out is through. We must roll up our sleeves and get to work. These struggles often push us into the next phase of our recovery. We can come out stronger and healthier people for the experience if we're willing to do the work. Early in recovery, we were told that if we kept coming to meetings, sooner or later we would hear our story. It would be a mistake to think that our using story is the only one we need to listen for. Our recovery story is no less dramatic, and there are times when we need just as much to go to meetings and listen for that. We hear it when we learn to listen with our heart as well as our ears. Sometimes we have to go looking for it, seeking new meetings, asking around and sharing about what's going on. We find people who have been through what we're going through and got through it clean. We need other people to walk us through hard times, and we need to reach out and help others as we heal. There is hope. When we listen to others share their pain and how they get through it, we get a broader view. We see new tools in action, and we can learn to use the experience to go forward in our own lives. When we change our attitude or perspective, we can find a new sense of compassion and gratitude. Perhaps the most valuable lesson of all is empathy. However, empathy isn't a treatment plan, it's a way of life. When we can relate with one another and see each other's growth, we begin to believe in the possibility of our own recovery. Listening to other addicts share without judging them is the beginning of listening to our own heart without judgment or punishment. When we have compassion for ourselves, we give ourselves permission to be in the world, and that makes us much more useful to the world.